I said to the court, it sounds like to me they're trying to hide the ball. We tried everything we could to get the witnesses here. We subpoenaed the FBI agents. We subpoenaed the state trooper. Now we're going to have to go through another proceeding just to get the witnesses.
Robert Durst's lawyer frustrated, but still on the attack today, trying to get his client released from jail. The real estate heir back in a New Orleans court facing gun and drug charges. Hello, I'm Ty Hernandez in New York. Durst was arrested March 14th, the day before the last episode of the HBO docuseries The Jinx aired. In it, Durst spoke about some of the unsolved crimes he's been linked to. His arrest last month was in connection to one of those, the murder of Susan Berman, an author and Durst's friend. Following the story, ABC's Matt Gutman, he joins us now outside that courthouse in New Orleans. Matt, we understand things got a little heated today in that courtroom.
Extraordinarily heated, Ty, and a lot of acrimony in the courthouse for very little legal resolution. Now, what was supposed to happen today was something like a mini trial. It's called a preliminary hearing in which the defense Durst team was going to say, hey, what actual evidence is there from the arrest warrant from Los Angeles to prove that Robert Durst should have been arrested here in New Orleans, just down the street from us at the JW Marriott Hotel. Now, theoretically, the defense should have presented some of its evidence, but what it did is just present the arrest warrant, which everybody has already seen. Now, this started the beginning of the acrimony, because then when Dick DeGuerin, who is the lead defense attorney for Robert Durst, said, okay, let me call some of the witnesses up to the stand, none of his witnesses showed up. They were two FBI agents and a state trooper, both of them allegedly ignoring that court subpoena. Now, the defense, the prosecutor coming back and saying, well, you have no witnesses. Call your other witnesses. Let's get this on. This went back and forth. Ultimately, that assistant district attorney saying, for the seventh time or sixth time, I call on you to call your witnesses, continually challenging and even pestering Dick DeGuerin, who didn't really take the bait. Now, one very interesting thing that happened, Ty, is that Dick DeGuerin accused the prosecution of playing hide the ball. Now, what he is saying, he's trying to invalidate the entirety of the proceedings here, saying the arrest warrant from Los Angeles here in New Orleans is invalid because it's based on scant evidence. And Durst's arrest at that New Orleans hotel for possession of a firearm and that pretty copious amount of marijuana, about 5 ounces worth, is also invalid because the FBI agents who were subpoenaed and didn't show up didn't actually search his apartment, his hotel room after they had a search warrant, but before it. They called it an inventory. The attorneys for Robert Durst call it an illegal search. So this went back and forth, and ultimately the judge sided with the defense, saying, hey, listen, these FBI agents and the feds did not show up as they were supposed to, as subpoenaed. I am going to call a hearing next Thursday, and it could be a possible contempt of court hearing for those feds. So a lot of fireworks, a lot of anger. The assistant district attorney's voice quavering at times. He was pointing at DeGuerin and at Durst and saying they don't have what they were supposed to bring today, actually shouting at them in open court, but very, very little resolution. So we'll have to wait another week to really see what happens in this case. But at this point, Ty, it is possible that the attorneys for Robert Durst could get all of this kicked out, all the evidence against Robert Durst tossed out because of that possibly illegal search.
All right, so much going on here legally. How did Robert Durst react when all of this was going down?
So Robert Durst hasn't reacted very much at all in the multiple times that we've seen him in court. Today he was wearing a yellow instead of orange jumpsuit, as always, shackled and in a chair, as always, looking very, very frail. Now, when the reporters first walked into the room, it looked to me like he was sleeping. His eyes were closed, his chin was kind of to his chest. He seemed to perk up once the proceedings began and seemed to be able to follow what was going on. Remember, the sheriff's office put him in a psychiatric ward about an hour outside of town. He was on suicide watch for a number of days. We think he's now no longer on suicide watch, but clearly his health is frail, although his attorneys say that he is not mentally ill. He has Asperger's syndrome, and just makes him seem a little bit off. He is not mentally ill. So he's going to be back in this courthouse many, many times before the proceedings here are through. Ty.
And Matt, Durst's lawyers made a request to speak with former district attorney and television personality Jeanine Pirro. What was that about?
So earlier this week, Dick DeGuerin told me that he is going to subpoena Jeanine Pirro, television personality and former Westchester County DA. Now, she was the one who allegedly was restarting this investigation against Robert Durst for the suspected disappearance of his first wife, Kathleen. It was believed at the time, or at least Jeanine Pirro said, that she thinks he killed her. And it was suspected also that she had called Susan Berman. That was the woman who Durst is accused by the Los Angeles Police Department of executing in her home, his best friend, his confidant. Apparently, Pirro and Berman had spoken or had been interviewed, and then Pirro was allegedly going to speak or call in Durst, that her case was progressing. Dick DeGuerin, Durst's attorney, all along has been saying that was never going to happen. That investigation never progressed because there was no evidence. So what happens is that he believes that Jeanine Pirro, sorry for the ambulance there. He believes that Jeanine Pirro has concocted a lot of this. He wanted to call her to the stand to tell everybody in court, including the judge, that she never, in fact, had any evidence against DeGuerin. She didn't show up. She's probably not in Louisiana today because she does not want to be subpoenaed. She does not want to go in front of the court and testify because that means she can't actually be present as a journalist in court. So that is another subplot to this story that has so many subplots and so many of them very legally complicated.
Yeah, and between all of these court dates, we have massive amounts of paperwork. Durst's lawyers have filed a motion also for surveillance camera tapes of the hotel Durst was staying at. Why is that important?
There was a significant amount of paperwork. All of those are important because the attorney for Robert Durst, Dick DeGuerin, says that he can prove that his client was spoken to, was interviewed by the prosecutor illegally. Apparently, Durst had a conversation with one of his attorneys just after he was arrested, in which it is heard on the audio tapes that the jailhouse recorded that Durst was in fact being represented by an attorney. The attorney likely said, "Do not talk to anybody without our presence there." Durst probably said, "I agree, I won't do that." And then somehow a DA from Los Angeles and local prosecutors managed to get an interview with him that lasted for 3 hours. Now, we don't know what Durst told them, but one can imagine that there was quite a significant amount of conversation if it lasted for 3 hours. Of course, DeGuerin, Durst's attorney, wants all of that tossed out.
Okay, and presumably next week back in court for that preliminary hearing, unless that's somehow interrupted during the course of the week?
No, we think that that's probably going to stay as it is. The judge seems adamant to start moving this forward. This is, I think, the third delay. I think he wants to get this process moving. Remember, Ty, Robert Durst hasn't even yet been arraigned. So he hasn't entered a plea. We don't know if he's going to plead guilty or not to the charges of possession of a weapon by a felon and possession of a weapon along with a controlled substance. That's at 5 ounces of marijuana. So this is still a case very much in its infancy, even though so much ink and so many words have been used in court about it.
All right, ABC's Matt Gutman, thank you so much. A lot to follow in this case. And you can keep up with this story in real time by downloading the ABC News app and starring the story for exclusive updates on the go. I'm Ty Hernandez in New York.